Welcome to the Winged Wheel Podcast. Here to talk all things hockey are your hosts, Brad Crisco, Ryan Hanna, and Evan Lobsinger.
Every year we wonder when the offseason is going to officially start, and every year it speaks to us.
It's today.
It's today.
It's 1,000% today.
Evidenced by the fact that I was actually able to get outside and do some yard work. But, we talked about it earlier this week and we thought, news is getting a little thin. It's the offseason, folks.
The DeBrincat trade really did save us.
It bookended it, yeah.
That gave us a full week of content.
Yeah, and it was good content. Well, the thing is, we knew it was coming, and that's why we were just like anxious wrecks leading up to it. Because it's like, is it going to come now, or is it going to come down on like July 29th or something? Then you're going to spend half the summer
That'd be horrible,
sitting there vibrating, waiting for it to happen. But bless Steve Yzerman for doing it when he did. I like how he said, someone asked him, like, are you going to do a lot more over the course of the summer? And he just flat out said, well, no, I think it's going to calm down now for the next little while. Mind you, don't take anything Steve Yzerman says at face value as a rule. But he said outside of a few administrative things, there's not going to be much else for the next little while. So it's the offseason now. All right, folks, welcome to the Winged Wheel Podcast, here to carry you into the offseason, talk about the Detroit Red Wings, give you an outlook into the team, prospects, and lots more. I am one of your hosts, Ryan Hanna.
I'm Brad Crisco.
And I'm Evan.
On this episode, what was that?
I'm dying. I'm dying.
With a
It's
big
the
old
off-season.
smile on his face.
You look like you rushed to the mic and you were sitting down.
I was about to yawn, and then Brad went really fast, so then I kind of swallowed my yawn.
Interesting.
We'll see when that comes back.
Yeah, we're going to pay for that one in about 90 seconds.
Yeah.
On this episode of the Winged Wheel Podcast, Evan is going to struggle to stay alive, but we are going to talk about some Red Wings to watch this upcoming season, and also talk about, if another move is to come before puck drop on the 2023-2024 season, what would it be? We'll give a little bit of an insight into the prospects and their outlooks over the coming year, as the roster at the NHL level is looking a little tight, and some minor signings from the Red Wings, some notes from across the NHL, and whatever else we get into before we take your questions for overtime. Before all that, I want to let you know that this podcast is almost entirely supported by our Patreon supporters. Patreon.com/WingedWheelPodcast if you want to join the Dub Club. You get benefits like access to our Patreon exclusive bonus episodes, which record right after these main ones. They're a good time. We let loose, have fun, talk about whatever, and take any additional questions that we didn't get to in the main show. You also get access to our Winged Wheel Podcast exclusive Discord, and you're automatically entered into all of our giveaways. For example, last season we gave away 2 tickets to every Red Wings home game, and we'll be doing the exact same this year, the vast majority going to our Patreon supporters. So again, patreon.com/wingedwheelpodcast if you want to support the show. Also, Saturday, August 26th at 5:30 p.m. at Motor City Casino is the Roast and Toast of Thomas Holmstrom and Nicholas Lidstrom, respectively, presented by Trinity Health in benefit of the Jamie Daniels Foundation. It's a fantastic event. Always, a lot of really good laughs there. There's going to be Doc Emmerich, Chris Draper, Ian Bagg, who's hysterical, Steve Ott, Evan, get ready with the marker, and Jim Ralph. You're going to see us, a bunch of NHLers, a bunch of Red Wings. There's 2 levels of tickets. One of them has cocktails, hors d'oeuvres, dinner, an auction. If you heard the last episode featuring Ken Daniels, you'll be able to see some of those live items. And there's also a silent auction that's going to be posted as well. So again, go to jamiedanielsfoundation.org to get your tickets. That's the Roast and Toast of Thomas Holmstrom and Nicholas Lidstrom, presented by Trinity Health. If you want to go, if you're planning on going and you want to sit at the Winged Wheel Podcast table, DM us at Winged Wheel Pod on Twitter, and we'll see if we have. There's a potential to add some of you guys to our table. So if you're planning on getting tickets and want to sit with us, DM us. If not, then don't DM us and stay far, far away. Which is what I would recommend. We're not that fun.
Highly.
Okay, let's start out here by looking at the Detroit Red Wings this upcoming season. Why don't we talk first about, what else could come? What was our analysis after the DeBrincat trade of what does this team still need to be a true playoff contender? We had the realistic, where is this team now? How could they compete? But looking in the grand scheme of things, still big picture, not necessarily in the immediate future. What else does this team need to be a bona fide playoff contender?
Well, mostly talent.
Good hockey players.
Yeah. No, the answer is scoring. Again, I don't care if that comes via a sniper, an all-around offensive playmaker, or the traditional sense of a playmaker. But the reality of being a Stanley Cup contender, you can't have JT Compher and Robbie Fabry in your top 6 and expect to compete. Could you maybe sneak into the playoffs? Sure. But if you have Raymond, Larkin, DeBrincat as your top line, and all three of them are definitively the best players at their position on this team, David Perron at least can keep it interesting, depending what side of the wing he's playing on any given game. But it's a substantial drop-off from there, and that can't happen. You look at what Vegas's second line did this year, which featured Mark Stone, is probably better than Detroit's first line. As much as I love the DeBrincat, Larkin, Raymond possibility, you have to keep, a full scope of the NHL while you're talking about it. You look at what all the top teams are doing, and they are not built like the Red Wings are now. And it's not through the style or anything like that. It's just simply talent. Their top 2 lines are 2 first lines. The Red Wings have finally scraped together what looks like a sustainable, long-term, viable first line. So if they want to be a really good team in the NHL, they need another one of those. And as of right now, if we want to factor in David Perron's age, they need 3 players to be able to do that. Some of that could come internal in time, not this year. Maybe Nate Danielson's that guy at second line center. Maybe Marco Kasper. I shouldn't even say maybe. Between the 2 of them, both top 10 picks, one of them better be.
Has to be.
Absolutely, beyond a shadow of a doubt. Maybe one of them shifts to wing, and that's 2/3 of that line. It's possible. Mazur, Berggren, there's options for guys within who could fill that role. But if you look at the projections for the players they have in the system, I would think all of them, at least 2 of them, would have to overachieve for that to be the case, which is unlikely for one player to do that, let alone 2 or 3. So is it going to be this offseason? I don't think so. This is one of the few things Yzerman said that I tend to believe him on. But they do need to pursue another top 6 forward or 2 or 3 badly.
The gaps are, as Brad stated, like they need top end talent. They need more support so that it's not just, a good first line and then, or a serviceable first line. And then everyone else is just, it's better than we had in the past. Like that is where the Red Wings are at. It is, progressively better year over year. But if you're talking long term, you want to be a bona fide playoff team. You're not talking about which one of you or Ottawa or Buffalo is going to sneak into a wild card spot. Then you do need bona fide top end talent in your top 6. And that comes at forward. I'm of 2 minds here. First of all, is you do need to see what improvement is going to come within. Raymond is a guy who we've highlighted time after time, but you also want to see how Berggren's going to develop. Is he going to be a guy who's going to float in the middle 6, or is he going to be an everyday top 6 winger who's going to be on your power play and a force to be reckoned with in terms of talent and production? You don't know yet. You want to know how Kasper and Danielson pan out. You want to see if Mazur is going to be not Bertuzzi 2.0. Mazur told us himself he doesn't want to be referred to that way, but is he going to fill that spot in the lineup, or is he going to be kind of more of a depth role guy? How's Amadeus Lombardi going to break through? There's a lot of growth from within that's actually substantial and could happen. It's not just GM speak from Yzerman. Like there's a lot of nodes here where you could get the talent that you need with some time. And there are also other options on the market right now, but spoiler, we'll get into the conversation here in a second. They just are the acquisition cost to me seems too high. The DeBrincat one was attainable because the Red Wings had leverage gifted to them. Alex DeBrincat wanted to come home to Michigan. He wanted to play for his hometown team. He essentially forced Ottawa's hand, and Detroit had to pay just the right amount for him. They didn't have to overpay, which you typically have to do for a guy of his stature in the NHL and his goal-scoring ability. And then they signed him to a great deal after. That leverage doesn't exist if they want a William Nylander long-term. That leverage doesn't exist really if they want to get Vladimir Tarasenko on the team short-term.
Clearly, it doesn't work for anyone.
No, Tarasenko's... Someone has to figure that one out, but yeah. So it doesn't... I don't want this to sound like, oh, playoffs are impossible this year and the Red Wings aren't going to do anything. I just think for the holes that the roster has now, I just don't think it's incredibly likely that they're going to be filled this offseason. Never say never. We could be recording an emergency episode, but again, the gaps in the roster are as Brad stated, and there's not a lot out there to fill them with.
Yeah, I think for free agency, they would be done. And now I think the message should be to the prospects, if you break down the proverbial door, you have a legitimate chance to make this roster. Now, is that great in the short term from a contract perspective? Maybe not. But I think now some of the growth has to come from within. You kind of see how teams do at the early and mid points of the season. You start to identify your next free agent crop, or maybe someone else wants to come to Detroit. I think you start looking at those sorts of things. I don't think now, given the dust has sort of settled on free agency, that there's really any world beaters out there to bring in.
So one of the content pieces that got eliminated when the DeBrincat news came out, at the near hour mark of recording that episode that night when the trade happened, we gave some time to the whole William Nylander thing. So a lot of people have been asking about it, and we answered that question with the context of the Red Wings hadn't traded for DeBrincat yet. So, let's kind of go through this one relatively quickly. William Nylander is a pending UFA. He has 1 year left on his contract with Toronto. They seem to be miles apart in terms of contract demands. Nylander reportedly wants a number that starts with 10 and is saying, well, if Marner got everything he wanted and more, and Matthews is getting everything he wants and more, why should I have to take a haircut on my contract? I actually kind of agree with him. It looks like Toronto may be in a position where dealing Nylander is the best option for them because they've passed deadlines to be able to, move the big four, the big three in a way that they wanted to. William Nylander, before the DeBrincat trade, we said wasn't terribly likely because he would have to come with an extension and the acquisition cost is so high, and DeBrincat is a much easier target to go through now, so you'd have to see what the acquisition cost is for DeBrincat before you even talk about Nylander. Is this even an option?
Yes, but it likely won't be, and I'm not sure it should be, and I'm a big William Nylander fan. I really like the player. I mean, you can't like DeBrincat and then not like Nylander. They are very similar players. There's a couple catch-22s with this that make it very, very different from the DeBrincat situation. One, the Leafs are a team that's in the position to acquire rentals. They are going for the Stanley Cup this year. So they're probably perfectly comfortable riding the season out with William Nylander, losing him for nothing at the end of the year, but, see how far they can get in the playoffs this time around because, when you trade a player like William Nylander, it is very, very rare that you're going to get a player of his caliber back. It's usually futures or a lesser player and futures to make up the gap. So the Leafs would not likely be a better team this season, which hurts them, obviously, with what their plans are. Two, Nylander's contract demands, though not ludicrous, are high. And if you look at the similarities between Nylander and DeBrincat, I know Nylander had a much better season this season. The Red Wings are not paying that. And even if they were, I'm probably not the biggest proponent of paying, let's say, $18 million to two undersized wingers who have very one-dimensional games. Like one-dimensional in terms of offense only. Mm-hmm. So the cap space is probably better utilized on a different type of player, specifically a center, if you're going big game hunting. So, if you could have DeBrincat and Nylander on the same team, that is a good thing, but it's not going to come at any sort of reasonable cap hit.
No, and not that Detroit and Toronto are necessarily competing right now. They're not fighting the same battles. You do take the whole intra-division perspective. It didn't really matter with Yzerman and Dorian, but you don't know how Tree Living is going to think about that. I almost said Dubas. Jeez, that's going to take some adjusting. Mm-hmm. But yeah, the obvious caveat that Brad stated is you don't do this unless it comes with any kind of extension. But if you thought DeBrincat was a hard sell to get a team to close in and finish the deal, and Detroit had essentially the widest fairway to doing so, Nylander is going to be a bloodbath if he's actually on the market.
I would imagine that Toronto would only move William Nylander if the return was just astronomical. And I just don't see the Red Wings putting together a package to make that happen. If I'm Toronto, I'm keeping him as a rental. Like, how could you couldn't, even the cost to acquire a William Nylander as a rental would be insane.
Yeah.
So, if your aspirations are to win the Stanley Cup this year, I think you're probably better with William Nylander in your lineup than not.
Yeah, it would be really cool for Detroit to add that kind of talent, like size, defensive aptitude, whatever. I don't disagree with you, Brad, in terms of locking up that much money between two guys who have the same kind of concerns. The Red Wings are still in a spot where they need any talent right now, and then you worry about filling in the gaps later. But yeah, you add that to what it would cost in addition via trade. It just seems unlikely that the Red Wings would be able to get away with getting DeBrincat for not a terribly large amount and then do the same thing with Nylander. So the summary on Nylander is, yeah, it'd be really great to have him on the Red Wings. I personally like his game too. I thought this last playoffs, he was a big statement for him. You know who he is as a player. He would make any lineup in the league better, but it would have to be at the right price. And if you're going to look at any situation across the league where the bidding is going to get high, this is the one. It also doesn't help that his contract ends the first year that the cap is poised to rise. So there are a lot more teams that are going to be in on Nylander who maybe wouldn't have been able to be this year. So that's William Nylander. We gave it the time. Now that we said it's not likely going to happen, we'll debate which number he's going to wear for the Red Wings when Yzerman inevitably makes that trade.
Yeah, because Daniel Sprong just took 88.
That's right, and Sprong's not giving that up. Sprong's putting up 30 in that number this year. Let's actually talk about some Red Wings to watch this season. And, the big ones are going to be DeBrincat. We talked a lot about Lucas Raymond and how if the Red Wings are going to improve at the top end, his improvement, the step that he's poised to take this year is going to drive a lot of that. But who are your other Red Wings to watch? Like, what guy are you looking at, and for what reason are you going to be intently tracking his progress over the course of the season?
Well, there's two that immediately jump to mind, so I'm going to pull a Ryan here, and I'm going to go with a defenseman. Jake Walman.
Damn it. Well, I'll start thinking of somebody else.
Jake Walman was last year a flash in the pan, or is Jake Walman and Moritz Seider a legitimate long-term top pairing? Again, last year they looked every bit the part, but that can't be a one-year thing. If they can do that consistently and for another season, that is a huge, huge, huge revelation for the Red Wings, because now they're just filling out the bottom of their defense. Way easier to do than finding a top pairing guy, because, even though he's got a good chance, I'm still not sold Edvinsson's a top pair guy. I don't think Wallinder's a top pair guy. I don't think Johansson's a top pair guy. Someone needs to play opposite Moritz Seider, and Walman was that guy last year, and he looked great doing it. So now, again, it changes the entire future of this team if it wasn't a fluke.
If your second pair is Edvinsson and Sandin Pellikka, we're doing all right.
You're going to win a lot of hockey games.
Yeah.
Like, even with the offense they have now, you're still going to win a lot of hockey games. With Walman, Seider not being a fluke, and then Sandin Pellikka, Edvinsson is your top pair. Oh, yeah. Oh, my God, yeah. That means
that's nice.
You got like Wallinder, and it almost doesn't matter who on the third pairing then.
Ben Sherratt.
Sure, why not? Maximum chaos. But, yeah, that's my big key to the future. Because, again, I know it sounds harsh to say, I want this team to make the playoffs this year, and I want to see improvement. I don't care about this season in the grand scheme of things. You know what I mean? Like, this season doesn't matter as long as the key markers that we're looking for this year are occurring.
If they make the playoffs, great. If they fight for the playoffs, great. If they finish, 2 spots out, then how did Raymond do? How did Walman do? That
exactly
stuff matters more. Yeah.
Walman, Raymond, Berggren, DeBrincat, they all have great years. And, like, the depth at forward or the depth at D or the goaltending goes to hell.
Yeah.
Oh, well. Whatever. It sucks, and I'd much prefer the alternative, but I don't care about this season. I care about the future, and those are going to be the players I'm looking at, because we know Seider and Raymond and Larkin are going to be good, and they're going to be key parts of the future. So who are the guys that are going to be playing up in the lineup with them that we're going to see this year?
I'll save you some time, Evan, or I'll buy you some time, I should say.
I don't need it, but you can go.
Oh, are you ready?
Of course, I was born ready.
Go ahead.
I have two, but I'll go with Berggren for now.
That was my forward.
Yeah, I know. That's why I had to get it out as soon as possible. Came up last year, had an excellent season, did not really look out of place other than he looks like he is a child. But in terms of his game, didn't really look out of place to me. So with all the additions on forward, my questions are, where does he slot in the lineup? It's probably a lot lower in the lineup than I would prefer, but how does he navigate the season playing on a lower line in the lineup? For me, it'll be interesting just to see how he sort of navigates everything this season. Maybe he starts up higher in the lineup than I thought, and it'll be interesting to see how he seizes those opportunities. I think there's still lots of room for growth with Berggren. This will be a very interesting season for him.
Yeah, with Berggren, he reminds me a lot, or he kind of triggers that point that Brad made in a previous episode of the Red Wings now have, even though it's not top-end talent on every line, they have enough talent where on every line you could reasonably see, a wave of potential offense. And Berggren right now, with the phase of his development that he's in, he's not likely to be in the top 6. I would love to be wrong. Obviously.
Maybe he goes on a heater.
Yeah. But if he's, in your bottom 6, that is still a lot of offense to have in your bottom 6. And if you have Daniel Sprong in your middle 6 and Robbie Fabry or Michael Rasmussen, one of them is likely to be there. There's going to be that kind of talent. And yeah, Berggren's kind of that marquee player in there. His big thing over the course of the season is you could tell the other team or his opponents were targeting him physically. Smaller player, newer to the league. You push him around, you bully him. That's just the NHL game, especially one with talent like he has.
Yep.
But he's a smart player. Like, we talk a lot about his offensive IQ, his hockey IQ, and it's not just, playmaking or a great pass. It's he knows where to be on the power play. He kind of positions himself on the right side of the net and clean up a lot of garbage. He did that how many times last season? And that kind of efficiency is important. I mean, Alex Chason probably played the Red Wings out of a higher draft pick by how efficient he was on a power play. So you don't need to be a world beater to improve this team right now. The bar is very, very low. And Berggren has the talent where, middle to long term, he should be, in my mind, a contender to be an everyday top 6 guy. But for now, he could have a great season even in a developing aspect.
Was that your person as well?
No, I'm just kind of, yeah. Okay. Mine is a little bit more of a running it back. I'm watching Andrew Copp this year. Andrew Copp last year, coming off of a big contract signing with Detroit, had his core surgery, missed the preseason, a lot of development and shaking off the rust and getting up to NHL game speed over the offseason. And you could tell he was rusty and just not, I don't want to say not in game shape, but not up to NHL speed to start the year. The kind of surgery he had, the core surgery, more about it came out over the course of the season in terms of familiarity with how it affects players. Steven Stamkos talked about how long it took him to get back up to speed, and it aligned a lot more with what we were seeing, because with Andrew Copp, it wasn't a few weeks. It was a few months, really, before we saw him turn it on. He ended the season with 42 points in 82 games, which isn't terrible. And a lot of that came on the back half, especially his stronger play. I haven't looked at the exact numbers, but if you went and broke down his game-by-game impacts, I guarantee you 2023 was way, way better than 2022. And if Andrew Copp in his age 29 year can come in and have a 50, maybe even 60-point year, that contract feels a lot better. One of Copp or Compher has to be the Red Wings second-line center this year, plain and simple. The only way that changes in my mind, and it's a good thing, is if Kasper or Danielson come out and shock us all. For me, Andrew Copp is poised to do that. We saw enough of him that was positive last year for me to believe in him as a player. Yzerman had to pay a premium on term for Copp. The price is whatever. That's acquiring guys in UFA. It costs a lot. He had to pay a premium in term. So a lot of people are looking at that contract and saying, is that going to be an anchor? I think Copp could come out and have a really good year. And it's on him to do it. But if he hits that 50 or 60 point mark, you'll feel a lot better.
Well, Ryan, I got news for you. One of Copp or Compher will be the Red Wings second line center this year, deserved or not.
That's what I mean. When I say that, I mean one of them has to play a deserving second line center role. Like Compher was, had to play in as a 2C in Colorado out of necessity last year. He had better teammates than he'll have in Detroit now, but I don't want it to be a situation where you look and you're like, oh yeah, they did fine, all things considered, or it was kind of dragging them down offensively. I think there's more there to Copp, even if he's not the flashiest player in the world.
I would certainly hope so for what they paid for him. And we know there is, but, this is the conundrum with free agents is there definitely is and has been more to Andrew Copp, but he's what, 28, 29 now?
Just turned 29, yeah.
Yeah, so we're at the stage of the career where, well, progression is probably not in the cards anymore, so we're hoping that he's regressing to the mean because of the injury. And, that definitely needs to happen. Otherwise, because this is people always jump in when I say this. Because if he doesn't, this contract's a disaster. I understand that could likely be as a result of the injury. And through nobody's fault, the injury occurred. But the contract's still a disaster if that happens.
If he plays like how he did in 2023 for the next few years, I think that's perfectly fine.
Like you're talking 42 points every year?
No, like
like the second half of the season? Yeah. Yeah, that would be fine. That absolutely is fine. And if he can maintain that level all the way to 33 years old, that is great. Again, post-injury plus aging curve, I have concerns. I did see enough from Copp last year that those concerns have been reduced, but they're still there. He's still 29. He's still coming off of major surgery, and he's still not going to have a lot of help on the second line.
I think
he might not even be on the second line. That could be Compher this year.
It could be Compher. But you know what? Based on what we saw is why I'm looking at Copp. I'm not sitting here guaranteeing it, saying, yeah, it's absolutely going to happen, but there was enough that you saw there last season where you're like, no, the Copp is a good contributing player to this team. He just needed to shake off the rust and get up to speed. And I don't want to conflate that with, he's going to get better and better every year for the rest of his contract. No, Father Time's undefeated, as evidenced by Brad's decrepit, aging body, practically dust. A medical miracle that you can even sit up in your chair right now.
I am so tired right now. I actually could fall asleep without you guys noticing right now.
We'll get you back to the home after this. Don't worry.
Please.
Yeah, it's pudding night. But
dude, you'd say that. You're sending me to a building where I get relatively quiet. People will wash and feed me. This sounds like heaven.
No, it's okay. We'll bring your kids to hang out with you. Oh. No, but in all honesty, it's like I'm not trying to be delusional about where Copp is in his development curve or his aging curve, but age 29, age 30, age 31, those should still be, if not your most productive years at age 29, it shouldn't trail off too much. And I'm pretty hopeful or optimistic that, the 2023 second half of last season Copp is what we can see this year, pending health, of course. So between him and Compher, yeah, you want one of them to step up and seize that second line role. And I think it's not crazy to say it could go decently. Neither, let's be very realistic about the players they are. Neither of them are going to be in, the NHL's top 20 most productive players by any means. This isn't going to be Mark Stone on the second line level productive. That's just not what the Red Wings have. But there's a way for them to fit into the lineup as is and still be not a drag on the second line. Going into next season, the Red Wings have projected, $8-ish million. There's obviously going to be smaller moves here and there. LTIR is going to come into play and whatever else injuries dictate. What else do you think the Red Wings could do? Or do you think they're going to sit with that cap room? Because Steve Yzerman said in his press conference that, he's not opposed to making a move and going up to the cap. They're not limited by, an internal limit. The Red Wings haven't been as long as this team has been competitive or in the last few generations. It's just not a thing. The NHL salary cap is low enough where I don't think anyone is concerned about the ability to spend to the cap. But Yzerman essentially said, there's not really a need, or we're not in that position right now, but if the right player comes up, we would do it. Do you see any kind of path to utilizing more of that cap space between now and the end of next season?
Do I see a path? Yeah. Is it an extremely likely one? No, because the Red Wings have 14 to 15 viable NHL forwards right now, only 3 of whom are probably legit top 6 forwards at this point in their careers. They have 7 to 8 viable NHL defensemen, depending on Edvinsson's health come opening night, and they have 3 viable NHL goaltenders. They're full. They're over full.
Mm-hmm.
So going out and bringing in more, Shane Gostisbehere, JT Compher level players is almost useless at this point. If you get a really good bargain on a guy, sure, why not? The only path, that being said, so the only path I see to them using that cap space in any significant way is if one of the Tarasenkos or Kanes struggles to have their contract needs met. If the tight cap around the NHL is pricing out a lot of contenders, if not most contenders, and a couple of these guys are sitting at the table going, am I taking a huge pay cut to win, or am I going to go get paid somewhere and, whatever happens? I don't think it's extremely likely. Teams will make room for a Tarasenko or a Patrick Kane if they are motivated enough, which for those players, teams will be motivated enough, even with their flaws. So I don't think it's extremely likely the Red Wings utilize that cap in any significant way throughout the rest of this season.
Yeah, I think the way you phrased it with, they have a lot of those players who are middling is maybe tough, but they're not top end.
No, it's the right word.
Middling players where you have enough, and at some point you're just kind of creating a problem for the players to break in. In terms of like the roster's fullness, I think they're at the right spot right now where if Mazur or if Kasper or if Edvinsson, depending his health after shoulder surgery, comes in and takes the choice away from them at camp and just performs extremely well, they'll have the opportunity to do that, but they won't be forced to play those players. Like you mentioned, Evan, you don't want to be in a situation where you're playing them out of necessity. So, yeah, if something comes up at the deadline where you can facilitate a deal, then great. This is kind of the last year before the cap is poised to rise, so the clock is ticking if you're going to get much else out of this cap space. But you can still do so. Teams are going to spend to the cap again, so it's not like the Red Wings are never going to be able to do it. And essentially the answer is you don't spend for no reason.
And yeah, you never know how the season materializes with other teams, right? Like some seasons go off the rails when they didn't expect it. Players become disgruntled and want out. Like very much could be opportunities there to continue to spend or make some hockey moves.
Yeah.
So yeah, I wouldn't say nothing is certain for sure, but that's always an opportunity or an area to explore.
Let's take a look at those prospects that we said might break into the team, or any of the Red Wings prospects actually for this next little bit here. Who's your prospect to watch this season? And this is going to be, likely a Grand Rapids Griffins season for most of the prospects. Who are you really keeping your eye on in terms of the Red Wings pipeline? Why? What do you think a successful season is for them? And, does it mean any games in the winged wheel for Detroit?
Oh, God. This question sucks. I could literally give 6 names and have just as much justification for all of them.
All my questions suck, Brad.
With where this team is at. Because, this is such a huge year for Kasper, Mazur, Danielson, Sandin Pellikka, Kosa. All of them. Hugely critical seasons for themselves personally and for the future of the Red Wings, right?
If you want a second player after the whole class has a turn, then you can give a second player. How about that?
Sure. I just doing math here. There will be. So
we'll get 2 each.
Oh my God.
Okay. So I'm going to pick one player for kind of dumb reasons, but whatever. In terms of proximity to the Red Wings and how you have to have a successful rebuild, the guy I'm watching closely this year is Carter Mazur. I don't think he's the most important prospect in the system. I don't even think he's necessarily the closest player to cracking through to the NHL in the system. But we've said time and time again, you need to find studs outside of the first round. You have to. You have to. And Mazur right now is looking like the Red Wings' best bet to be that guy. I think we can all sit here with a reasonable amount of certainty and go, Danielson's going to be a really good NHLer. Kasper's going to be a really good NHLer. Edvinsson, Axel Sandin Pellikka. To what degree is the question with those guys? Carter Mazur was an afterthought third-round pick who has a very legitimate shot of being a offensive threat in an NHL top 6. If he continues his progression and has a year in Grand Rapids where he is, a point per game player or hovering around there, man, that is a gigantic boost to this rebuild, because now all of a sudden, on top of this stable of first-round picks Yzerman has accumulated in his tenure, he's got a third-round pick now who's going to be contributing more than maybe some of them might. So for me, I'll say Carter Mazur, because that's kind of like the power-up bonus you get in Super Mario.
I'll add on Lombardi as well, all for sort of the same reasons Brad mentioned. I know we say, oh, this team lacks superstar talent or needs upper echelon elite talent. It's like, well, eventually one of your second, third, fourth, fifth rounders has to hit, and I think those are the two guys that are earmarked to have success more likely than they are not. Do I think either have a good chance of making it out of camp? No, not really. But if we're going to be talking just watching prospects, I think those two are kind of the ones that everybody should be really excited about.
Simon Edvinsson, to me, is a player who's going to have a little bit of an interesting year. It's not ideal for him to have had shoulder surgery coming into this offseason. Player his age and size, you really want him to fill out in terms of strength, muscle, work on his game in the offseason. Defensemen have an especially hard time getting up to speed in the NHL. It typically takes them longer. Defensive hockey IQ is a thing, but how you execute it in the game, like even the smartest of defensemen struggle. They make, poor mistakes and they're out of position and they get burned. Look at Seider, look at Dahlin, look at any of the defensemen who kind of came up and who are considered smart defensemen in their own end. They still make those mistakes. So for Edvinsson to, lose in some capacity that offseason is going to be difficult for him. I'm not going to say he's going to have a bad year for that reason. I'm not going to say he's behind the 8 ball, but he's really going to have to work to earn his spot on the team, and it might not be there, which may be a surprise considering he played his 9 games for Detroit, and I think he looked good.
From preseason to those 9 games was like a complete change of player.
100%. He had a really good year of development. So for me, success is he finds his way back onto the roster by the end of next season. But I could see a lot of outcomes here where he doesn't, but you're still happy with his progression because Grand Rapids has a new coach come in. They have a little bit of a different outlook and mindset, and he has a good year developing there. But he's really going to have to kind of grind and battle to kind of make up for lost time. You hope that the injury is on the shorter end of the time span. If you ever want a little cheat code, whenever NHL teams give long-term, recovery windows, it's almost always on the shorter end of it, if not even shorter than what they propose. Like if they say 6 to 8 months and you see the guy at 5 months, that's probably what they figured the entire time, but they don't want to overpromise. It's easier to underpromise and overdeliver. So I hope that's the case with Edvinsson. Is it imperative for him to come out, be an NHL regular this season, and automatically be a second pair defenseman and fight for a first pair spot? No, obviously you would love that, but based on the shoulder surgery, you kind of have to give him a longer window. So if it's still Grand Rapids, that's okay, but you want to see that kind of progression where, as Evan said, like, wow, from start of the year to now, he has really, really worked on his game, because he's a guy extremely skilled, extremely talented, a lot of edges to kind of smooth out, and that's been his MO since he was drafted.
Yeah, and 6th overall pick. Yeah, you have to. You can't miss on these to have a successful rebuild, especially when you don't have any 1, 2, or 3 overall picks to supplement.
Exactly. Well, you could be the Rangers and just have 1st and 2nd overall picks whiff.
Yeah, and then just go trade and sign all the best free agents, which the Red Wings have clearly had a great time doing.
Hey, they're on a roll right now. You can have another prospect now, Brad.
Okay, I'm going to go against logic here, and I'm just going with the one in my heart. I'm watching a lot of Axel Sandin Pellikka this year. If we're talking pure ceiling, he might have the highest of anybody in the Red Wings system right now. This guy has a legitimate chance to be an offensive right-handed superstar from the, blue line, which is a lofty ceiling. And, we've talked at length about how likely players are to hit their ceiling. And, begrudgingly, most fans seem to admit now that it's far less likely to happen than they would like to think. But the ceiling is there for Sandin Pellikka. You know, we've seen what he's done at the U18s and in junior and leading to this point where it's not just that he's been good at those levels. He's been dominant. He's been the best, which is crazy. And again, we talk about the fact that despite only being 5'10", 5'11", he does not have that many defensive shortcomings. Like, he has a very well-rounded game with this elite offensive mind that he possesses. So if he can turn into that guy in a 17th overall pick, which I'd be remiss if I didn't point out is right around where Erik Karlsson was drafted.
All right, everybody, take a drink.
Hit the big red button on your desk.
See, the best part about that bit is I do it now only to bother Ryan, and it works every time, and it pleases me so.
I need to find a better button for that instead of the air horn. It's just what was in front of me.
There's got to be better ones in there. But either way, the Red Wings, despite everything they have in the system and despite all the moves they still need to make, are not likely going to be able to build that team that is an offensive dynamo up front. It's just the way the chips fell for them, it's probably not going to happen. They still need to add some pieces, but they're never going to have the offense of a Tampa or a Vegas or an Edmonton or a Toronto. It's not possible in the market with their draft lottery luck and with the reluctancy of free agents to come to Detroit. But they can build a stout blue line. They're already there. And if they can get a substantial amount of offense from the blue line, that could help. You know, you can get offense from all 5 players on the ice. Here's the catch-22. The Red Wings, quote-unquote, offensive defenseman in the NHL and in the system outside of Sandin Pellikka, almost non-existent. Seider's got some offense. Wallinder can bring some offense. Like, and I'm talking to a meaningful level, like not that these other guys are incompetent offensively.
No, but they're not known as the
yeah.
None of these guys have Letang or Karlsson comparables.
Exactly. Sandin Pellikka does. And he might be the only one in the system not named Moritz Seider that could ever put up a 50-point season from the blue line. So that could be a real good way to help the grand scheme of the offensive problems the Red Wings have and are going to have.
Speaking of defensemen, I'm curious to see what Wallinder and Johansson do. Edvinsson gets so much of the airtime because he's, the premier left shot defensive prospect that the Red Wings have. But you talked to some folks over the course of last season, they thought, no, Johansson's closer, or Wallinder's going to come over and really surprise. And Wallinder had himself a great season over in Sweden. So with these guys in North America now and how close are they to making the team, there's an opportunity for them. Like, we might see a changing of the guard quicker than anticipated in Detroit, and it could come in one big wave. They could force Yzerman's hand or Derek Lalonde's hand, and all of a sudden guys who are on the roster now are being moved out or scratched or whatever it might be, or maybe injuries, which is typically how it goes, open up opportunities. But I'm curious to see how they really kind of push the roster above them this year. And Wallinder especially, I know Yzerman doesn't love playing defensemen on their offside, so Wallinder's left-handed, but he does play right D, or has quite a bit. So I'm curious to see where he lands as well. The Red Wings did pick up Sandin Pellikka for the right side behind Moritz Seider, hopefully in the future. Will Wallinder do the same thing? Don't know. But no matter what, like, there's talent behind Edvinsson, and it's not just him. Brad's right. Like, there's none of these guys are, you can't pin them up on a board and say, yes, absolutely, they're going to be top pair guys. But they could potentially be those diamonds in the rough, like Brad referred to with Carter Mazur, but just from the defensive end. So both Wallinder and Edvinsson, or both Wallinder and Johansson, I should say, are guys to watch.
Your little spiel there, while very good and made a ton of sense, just made me angrier about the state of the Red Wings blue line right now.
Welcome to the Winged Wheel Podcast.
Well, no,
folks.
Think about this. But legit, think about this. I don't think Sandin Pellikka's 3+ years away. Wallinder and Johansson are definitely not 3 years away. They should be arriving sooner than that. And that's not even to speak of what might happen with William and some of the other guys. Assuming Seider gets an extension, which I think is a pretty safe bet.
Yeah.
4 of the 6 blue liners on the Red Wings right now are signed for 3 or more years, and Mata has 2 years left as well.
That's with the Seider extension assumption.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That is not a lot of space for a lot of good prospects. So, just circling back to one of the reasons I was angry about the whole contract. But
But
as you were, Ryan, talking about happier things.
The thing is, and we talked about this not enough, I found in free agency, you can still make moves. For reasons unbeknownst to a lot of people, GMs do love to trade for the hole types, the Sherrod types. And if your prospects are doing so well where, you're using 2 to 3 other spots and Hole and Sherrod are either at the bottom pair or one of them is healthy and up at the press box or whatever it might be, a lot can change between now and then. So if we're talking...
it has to for this team to contend. It has to.
100%.
We better, and I mean this very literally, we better be sitting here in 2 years having the conversations about how we're going to unload some of these players because we need to get Wallinder, Johansson, whoever through.
Agreed. And I will go so far as to say I think that's part of Yzerman's plan.
Yeah.
Which is a risky thing to say, to assume anything of what goes on in Yzerman's head. But I genuinely mean it. I think that's part of his plan. He has revealed a little bit of that. He's kind of hinted at it. Like, you can make those moves down the road, and it's not also static and baked in. The NHL has, I feel, opened up a little bit more in terms of moving those contracts around since, the middle Ken Holland era. And again, the Sherrod types, the Hole types, whoever. Olli Mata could be, people are going to see how he performs in Detroit and say, wow, I would love that kind of stabilizing force on my team, especially for a cup run maybe. Like, you can make those moves down the road. It's not impossible. It's just hard to conceptualize. Why would you sign a guy only to want to trade him? Well, it's because your young guys aren't ready, but they might be in 2 years. So you pay the price you have to pay in free agency to get them to come here, but down the road, maybe you have to move them.
Well, that's the one thing I have noticed with, I'll say, a small segment of NHL GMs is they have now understood the value of addition by subtraction. You look at, Chicago was, as much as I hate to give them credit for anything, the first team to really understand that cap space is valuable, flexibility is valuable. So after they won that first cup and every player wanted a raise and they went into salary cap hell, they're like, all right, bye. We're going to trade you. We're going to not sign you. We're going to buy you, whatever. We are going to be aggressive in moving you. And, Tampa has followed suit and a bunch of other teams have followed suit in terms of, yeah, okay, we will do what we have to do. We will trade a draft pick, a good draft pick, to get this contract off our books. We will buy this guy out and eat whatever the hell we have to because we can replace him with a better player for less money than the difference on that buyout. So that is in my head. Obviously, the Red Wings haven't had to do that in any sort of aggressive way yet, because all the buyouts and everything they've had has either been weird circumstances or just aggressively bad players relative to the contract.
Mm-hmm.
So there is very much the hope that is ultimately Yzerman's plans. Like, yeah, okay, we've got Sherrod and Hole for 3 more years each. We know that they're not going to be good in year 3, but it's a stopgap. And whenever these next guys are ready, we send these guys to Mars. Like, whatever you have to do. That is the hope. And I think that probably is, you're right, that probably is the plan.
Yeah.
Just to be like, all right, every one of our defensemen not named Moritz Seider right now at this moment is expendable. We just need the guy who's next in line to show that it's worth getting rid of that guy.
Kick down the door.
Yeah. Like, literally, it sounds bad. They need to kick a player into the press box.
100%. And something in terms of an analysis point of view, something that I find myself guilty of doing is, Ken Holland era late when it got bad. And I've said time and time again, Ken Holland should have a statue wherever the Red Wings are playing at the LCA for the success he had with the team. But the late Ken Holland era, like, that was problematic. That was very, very hard for Steve Yzerman to come in and untangle. A lot of it had to be addition by subtraction. And we have such an aversion to unoptimize the use of cap space because the Red Wings were up against the cap and one of the worst teams in the league for how long? They couldn't buy cap space. And now that they have it, you're like, oh, money on a buyout, that was avoidable, or retained money, that's avoidable. But it's there to use, and you just have to kind of shake off the PTSD of when the Red Wings were that worst of both worlds kind of thing. And so I've really had to kind of get over that mentally in my head to say, using buyout money to get a little better, buying out Yamamoto because he didn't fit into your team, whether or not you agree with that move, it's inexpensive and you have the cap space so you can use it. As long as you're not getting crazy with it, because GMs do get insane with it.
Minnesota.
Philly just had to buy out D'Angelo, and he shouldn't have been signed in the first place to that deal. It was bad from the previous GM, and now Danny Briere's paying the price to clean it up. And even though it hurts, that is addition by subtraction. That cap space is better use elsewhere. You just have to kind of shift, or I had to kind of shift the way I thought about it. And it's almost like for those who play fantasy sports, fantasy football or whatever, the teams who are often really, really successful are the ones who are really active, working the waiver wire, making deals, always trying to optimize their lineup. Not universally, a lot of it's luck and really good drafting, but you're active, you're using the tools available to you, you're using your free agency budget if you're in one of those leagues, it'll get you far.
Yeah, and I'm glad you brought up PTSD from the Wallinder, because every time we have these conversations along these lines, I have to fight the urge so hard to not make some comment about, oh yeah, well, it'll be great while Wallinder sits in Grand Rapids for 4 years. Because at least this regime, okay, players ready, bring them up. Yeah. They've shown they're willing to do that. Raymond obviously being the hallmark of that to this point. So this, old shtick about over-ripening prospects doesn't hopefully resurface, because that would also be very problematic for the rebuild.
Yeah, that one's been completely absent in my mind.
Yeah, it has been. There hasn't been a prospect in the Yzerman era where we've been sitting here going, why the hell isn't he in the NHL? Whereas in the last, like you said, 5 to 6 years of the Holland era, it felt like there were one or two of those every season.
Yeah. All right, some remaining Red Wings news. It's just a couple minor contracts. Both Wyatt Newpower and Jared McIsaac were signed to 1 year, 2-way contracts at $787,500. So again, 1 or 2-way doesn't affect whether or not they're waiver eligible. It's just how much they get paid in the NHL versus the AHL. Neither one of these guys is going to be likely to be kicking down the door for a Red Wings roster spot. I don't want to write off Jared McIsaac, who's had some, I think, unfortunate injury luck over time, but there's a lot. Think of all the defensemen we named who are technically or in practice ahead of him on the Red Wings prospect chart, but depth signings and guys to look out for in Grand Rapids. Evan, you've escaped. We're not going to ask you for your way too early season projections. We can save that for when we're closer to next season.
Fair enough.
Some news from across the NHL, some signings coming through. Tanner Jeannot, the most recent 2-year, $2.665 million contract. Alex Newhook in Montreal, 4-year, $2.9 million. Are they trying to redo the Kirby Dach thing over there?
I was going to say, boy, do they love their reclamation projects.
Yeah.
Hey, Kirby Dach worked for them.
It did work. Keandre Miller, 2-year deal for $3.872.
That seems really good, right?
That is an absolute steal, because it's probably the Rangers probably know what's happening here.
Yeah.
Hey, we can't afford you right now for what you're probably worth, so we're going to give you a bridge deal until we have a bit more cap room. And if you keep playing the way you've been playing, you're going to get the absolute Brinks truck in your driveway the second that contract comes up.
Yeah, so good now, but in 2 years, let's see how that feels. It's kind of similar to Dallas and Jason Robertson when they had to pay him,
1,000%.
But they might not care. It's
you get a cup in those 2 years, yeah. You don't care what happens after that.
It's also GMs buying themselves time too. Like we just said, Yzerman can do this, and that to free up cap space. They can make tough decisions between then and now. Look at Vegas. Now that they won a cup, if teams weren't copying Vegas already, like they are going to be copied left, right, and center. And they are a team who, more than anyone else in my mind, is not afraid to make a tough decision for their roster.
Well, I hope that's the case, because then that makes the league a lot more entertaining.
Yeah,
they're willing to just cut guys loose and make big trades.
100%. And I think you'll see more as the cap goes up too. Like I'm so curious to see what happens. This next upcoming cap increase is just the first one. It's going to go up again, and after that, it's going to be affected by revenues. Let's see what they do in terms of actually growing the sport and bringing more money in. Goodness knows, I hope they're getting paid a fortune for those terrible board ads, but
probably not.
Probably not. Okay.
Award-winning board ads.
That's right.
Fans love them.
Fans love them. Notably, fans love them. Andrei Kopitar also extended in LA for 2 years, $7 million a season. And how are you going to be mad at that one if you're a Kings fan? It's the closest thing to Patrice Bergeron in the league, in my mind.
He can maybe afford a 1-bedroom apartment
in LA. Yeah, that's right. People are making that joke. You're talking about Zadina going out to San Jose. It's like, oh man, rent in California. Good luck.
Not good, bud.
Yeah. Okay. Why don't we take this opportunity to jump into overtime? Overtime on this episode of the Winged Wheel Podcast is brought to you by our Patreon supporters. Patreon.com/WingedWheelPodcast if you want to support the show. Again, you get benefits like the bonus episodes, the Discord, the giveaways, And what it allows us to do is continue to grow the show. We have the expanded Winged Wheel podcast content universe. There's a show called Expected by Whom, hosted by Sean Shapiro and Prashant Iyer, which you should absolutely listen to. Follow them on Twitter as well. It allows us to support the Jamie Daniels Foundation in their fight against substance use disorder. And it also allows us to run partnered events with the Detroit Red Wings. So Winged Wheel podcast nights at the LCA. We put up all the costs for that, and that's out of our pockets. So our patrons are what allows us to do that. So it's a great way to get the fans together and, again, generate more support for the Jamie Daniels Foundation. So, again, patreon.com/Winged Wheel Podcast. Drew Peeballs says, what 2 Red Wings all time would you want to add to this current roster to make it a contender? We'll make it easy and take Helm off the table since we know he'd be all of your first picks.
Steve Yzerman, Nick Lidstrom.
Yeah,
that would help significantly.
Yeah. If you don't want to go Nick Lidstrom, you can go Sergei Fedorov. You can go a lot of directions.
Do we get the player in their prime, even if it was for another team?
That's what I'm assuming.
Okay, that opens it up a little bit.
Dominic Hasek.
I'm thinking Hasek. Hasek probably gets a real long... He's the greatest goalie of all time.
Yeah. Yeah, that's a good one.
Yeah.
Samuel Soderholm says, first off, good on you, Ryan, for finally having nailed the pronunciation of my last name. Finally, I feel like I've been saying it right the whole time. Shit. Well, I'm sure I messed it up then. Sorry about that, Samuel. Says, what do you guys think the ceiling is for Berggren, and how do you deploy him to help reach said ceiling?
Well, that's the catch-22 because overall success for the team, the player's ceiling doesn't matter because for a player to reach their ceiling, they probably have to play higher in the lineup than they probably should. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like if you put Berggren on the second line this year, he's probably going to have a really good year. Is that what's best for the team? Maybe. It could be, but maybe not. I don't know. I think Berggren's ceiling is like a 50-ish point middle 6 winger who can be a primary distributor on the power play. And like that's ceiling. I don't think he's ever going to be like a 70, 80 point guy. He doesn't have the tools for that. So if he can get to that 50 plus point mark, I think we're real happy.
I think ultimate ceiling is a bit higher than that. I'm not saying like an every year in, year out point per game guy, but I think it could be closer to that than maybe not. But that's, again, low probability of him reaching that ultimate ceiling. Admiral Matt S. of the Cheesebag Navy says, is this potentially the biggest trade by the Wings in our recent memory? I believe this is the biggest trade since 2001 when we sent Kozlov and a first to Buffalo for Hasek. Before that, I think you have to go back to 96 when we sent Keith Primo, Paul Coffey, and a first to Hartford for Brendan Shanahan. Both of those trades got us Stanley Cups. Yes, the Mantha-Verona trade was big in context, but Verona and Mantha were not 40-goal scorers or multi-Vezina winning goaltenders and future Hall of Famers. To be clear, I'm not saying just getting DeBrincat will win us a cup, but this is a giant piece that I believe will move the needle forward by a significant margin. I want to hear your thoughts on this. Keep up the good work as always, Dubs.
Yeah, I'm struggling to think of a super impactful trade that, wasn't like acquiring futures in a long, long time.
I actually was trying to pull up a group chat from like 2022, like late 2022, when we were having just a general conversation of what does this team do? And we were going through the list of what is actually realistic, but almost no chance of it happening because it just doesn't happen in the NHL or to Detroit. And DeBrincat was brought up. Like DeBrincat was at the top of the list of what is feasible with all eventualities in the universe, but extremely unlikely. This is absolutely the biggest trade in a generation of Red Wings fandom in my mind, and it's not close. It's the biggest news we've had on the show. I have to go check the stats, but I think it's our most listened to episode of all time.
Holy shit.
Like and not particularly close. Like it shot up the board, and it came after free agency and draft, and those are our 2 biggest episodes every year without fail.
Mm-hmm.
And it cleared them in an instant. Like this is absolutely the biggest news we've had in the podcast history, the last 10 years, 15 years, 20 years, undoubtedly in my mind.
Yeah, Brian Rafalski was a free agent, right? He wasn't a trade?
Yeah.
Yeah, so like impactful acquisition of a player via trade. 01 feels right.
Yeah.
The Red Wings did trade Pavel Datsyuk.
What a different time when we thought,
Shut up. No, I'm happy this episode. Don't.
Stamkos didn't even come.
Shut up.
Okay,
He didn't even answer the phone.
Next question from the Gyms says, hey boys, what would you like to see the NHL add to enhance the offseason? I see people talk about a summer league, but what about a street hockey or roller hockey tournament mixed with average Joes or versus prospects?
I will take any entertainment where we can throw beer leaguers in with the NHL so people just know the different level they are on. Because, again, that's my biggest thing that I try to convey to every average hockey fan so they can enjoy the game more. It is almost impossible to understand how far beyond your average hockey player these guys are. Guys that play in my shitty semi-pro league get clowned by the worst player in the NHL. Clowned. If Justin Holl decided to play forward and came and played in the top level semi-pro league in Canada, he would score 4 goals a game if he tried. Mm-hmm. It's so hard to fathom. So yeah, give me a summer league. I don't care who's playing. Throw in 1 beer leaguer per team. I'm watching every minute.
The Angry Ginger says when Mazur... Actually, one thing I will say, going back, I liked watching Joe Pavelski in the PGA. It's not PGA, but it's like the Pro-Am that they run. There's no reason why fans wouldn't like to see what players do in their offseason like that. Like if you want to do a golf tournament, do like a roller hockey thing for the prospects are way easier to get out there. Like convince Trevor Zegras and the Hughes kids and all of them to go out there and do like a roller hockey or even just like a not pickup, but you know what I mean, style tournament. That'd be great. Like a Pro-Am style golf outing for NHL players. Like it's not going to hit every target every time, but make sure hockey doesn't disappear from people's minds for 3, 4, 5 months at a time.
Remember the stories from a bunch of years ago that Michael Ryder moonlit as a ball hockey goalie in the offseason?
Yeah.
I would watch the shit out of that.
100%. And they do. They have, what is it, the Debuts League or whatever it is?
Debuty League, yeah.
Like they do stuff. Like they do go out there
but they don't advertise it. They don't broadcast it. It's like you get it through social media clips, which is better than nothing.
But what if we said time, and also with the roller hockey thing, what if we said time and time again? Like hockey's a very expensive sport. Ice time is scarce. It's just flat out not possible with infrastructure and accessibility as it is right now to get every kid on the ice. You'd love to, but just get a stick in their hands, teach them about street hockey, teach them about roller hockey. And if you make like a summer roller hockey league, the big marquee advertisement for that concept, and it's a year-long initiative, oh God, it just makes too much sense. NHL, DM us if you want to know where to send the royalty checks. The Angry Ginger says, when Mazur eventually cracks the lineup, what do you expect his first season to look like? Not a top 10 pick like Raymond, but would you think it to be having similar production as Raymond's first year? Also, what do you expect Seider's contract to come in at AAV-wise?
I don't think Mazur's first year will look like Raymond's, because Raymond's rookie year, he had like 60 points. I would think if Mazur can put up 40 plus in his first year, he's doing great. And Seider's AAV, I'm going to say 9 plus a bit.
I still think comes in under 9. I think as
Are
we
you
get
talking on a bridge or long term?
long term.
I think it's over 9 if it's long term.
Yeah, you and I are far apart on that one. I don't think he's going to get in for like $6 million or anything like that, but maybe I'm not factoring in the rise in the cap enough here. But I just feel like,
and the fact he's a jack of all trades, right-handed number 1 defenseman.
They're going to look at his production this year is going to dictate a lot. Like if he has production this year similar to last year overall, I think they'll be able to get him in under 9.
If he breaks 50 points again this year, he's going to be closer to 10 than 9.
Oh, no. That's getting too high.
If he breaks 50 points again?
They won't let him get that far above Cale Makar. Plain and simple.
Yeah, but that's cherry picking. There is a lot of $9 to $9.5 million defensemen that Mo Seider is already better than.
Yeah, but those aren't convenient to my argument, Brad.
Yeah, no, because Darnell Nurse or Mo Seider? I think I'm taking Mo Seider. Mo Seider's probably getting into that Charlie McAvoy tier. What about Seth Jones? You taking Seth Jones or Mo Seider?
Bad contract.
It's a horrible contract, but you think Mo Seider's camp's going to take care about that?
That's convenient for them.
Where are you on this, Evan?
I don't know. We'll have to do a full episode, and I'll play arbiter.
That's right. Yeah, you know what? The Seider Raymond potential extensions are future content, so I'll stop borrowing from our future selves right now.
Actually, hold on. I'll have my exact prediction now that I think about it, because I know exactly how the Detroit Red Wings operate. You want an exact number? 8.65.
8.65 for 8 years?
Yeah, or maybe not 8 years, by 6 or 7 years.
Look into the camera.
No, you know why? Do you know why I picked that number?
Why?
Nobody makes more than Larkin.
Well, internal cap limits are a thing.
No, it's a very real thing. It's the dumbest thing that I think the NHLPA should ever. Their agents should argue this every time. Like, yeah, that's great. He signed that contract years ago. We don't care. But that is exactly what the Red Wings will argue.
I think it's going to be hard for teams to get away with that now. Like, so many players were signed now before the cap increases.
1,000%.
Like, look at Jack Hughes' contract. First of all, that was a phenomenal contract from the moment it was signed. And there was some mention of, we're going to try to use Hughes as the internal cap limit. Well, you couldn't do that because $8 million is already too little for Hughes, and they just had to sign Timo Meier to 8.8.
Yeah,
and that's because Timo Meier further in his career. There's more UFA years bought there, and the cap is going up, so you have to factor that in. So this kind of nexus, this point of transition, is going to make it more difficult for teams to try to do that. But I sure hope Steve Yzerman's successful in it.
Oh, I really hope Yzerman's successful in it, because I think Mo Seider, if he walked into that office and said, I am the most important player to the future of this team, he might not be wrong.
No, he wouldn't be. Old Colonel says, and this is on Reddit, says, looking around the Atlantic, have any teams other than Boston or Tampa gotten worse in your mind?
Toronto's going to score a lot more goals, but they're also going to let in a lot more.
That just feels like the topsy-turviness of Toronto in general.
Ottawa got worse. They lost Alex DeBrincat.
But they're going to get Josh Norris back.
Yeah, but they lost Alex DeBrincat.
Yeah, 27 goals.
Ryan, go with the bit.
That's right, yeah. But they added Dominic Kubalik, which is pretty good of them. I don't know. The Atlantic is not an easy division to move up in from the bottom, especially right now. T-Dime23 says, whose cap situation is the worst in the league?
The Islanders. It's 1,000% the Islanders.
Okay. Their long-term cap situation especially is rough.
We're looking at the big picture here.
Yeah.
Like 90% of the league's up against the cap right now, but a lot of these teams always get some breathing room every summer because one or two decent-sized contracts drops. Like, even San Jose's isn't so bad anymore because a lot of those bad contracts are nearing the end, and they've already been able to unload one or two of them. The Islanders is just, Jesus. Like, because they're a mediocre team right now. I don't even think I'm predicting them to make the playoffs this year. And they doubled down on this group, and they're all signed for 1 billion years. That team is going to suck so bad in like 3 to 4 years.
Some GM's going to come in after Lou and have a hell of a job. They're going to have like a Danny Briere style job to clean up.
Oh, they're going to have it's going to be the Ken Holland. They're going to be walking. That is my exact projection for the Islanders, is exactly what happened to Detroit. Except here's the thing. The Islanders never had a Datsuk or Zetterberg to at least have made that situation palatable at the time.
Toronto's is going to be interesting. I don't want to call it bad. You don't have that kind of talent on your team and say, oh yeah, you're in a bad. It's good problems to have.
Well, and they're not in a bad spot because none of these contracts have like 8 years left on them.
Well, they're going to have to.
They probably want some of them too, but they don't.
To stay as good as they are now, though, they're going to be in a little bit of a bind.
Yeah.
So we'll see what they do. I don't know how to say. Apai Triga 13 says, "Hey boys, a bit of a fun one. If you could change one moment in NHL history, what would it be and why?" Okay, I'm going to assume this is on ice stuff because as a Red Wings fan, the obvious answer is the limo accident, you would hope. But on ice, what would you change? Or in Red Wings history. So one in NHL history, and what would you change in Red Wings history?
Well, the Red Wings history is obvious.
Yeah, that one's 09.
Yep. I love Marc-Andre Fleury as a player, but I'll never forgive him for that save. So I'm going to go that one. And in NHL history... Ooh, I'm just trying to think of good things that happen to teams I hate.
Yeah,
there's a lot of candidates.
Yeah. How far back do you go here? What about this one's kind of a fun idea because the Red Wings were still very successful without him, but that whole Wayne Gretzky went to bed thinking he'd be a Detroit Red Wing in the morning.
Holy shit, yeah.
And his dad pretty much said, look, the Red Wings are already a historic team. There's players who have done it there before you. That's Gordy's team. You can go to LA and make that, like, create a legacy. And he wasn't wrong, but it does leave a big.
I have a very personal answer because that reminded me of one. I would go back in time and change whatever moron it was at the 1989 NHL draft that told the Detroit Red Wings Pavel Bure was not eligible to be drafted when in fact he was. We could have had Pavel Bure in that draft class. Fedorov, Lidstrom, Konstantinov, Bure. And because Bure is my favorite non-Red Wing of all time, the fact he was that close to being a Red Wing kills me every time I think about it.
Okay, but you want to know what?
88 and 89, the Red Wings are a hair from getting Gretzky and Bure.
Oh, my God.
They would not have lost a game in the 90s had that happened.
But the onus was on the team to provide proof of eligibility, and Vancouver had different proof than what Detroit had.
Whatever I have to change to make it happen, if I have to transport that proof from the Canucks table to the Red Wings table, that's what I'm changing.
Yeah. That one, between Gretzky and Bure. And it's like, how are you going to complain? They won in 97. They won in 98. They won in 02. Like,
they were the best team in the 90s.
They were the best team around.
And they just lost out on Gretzky and Bure. They would have went, how many games would they have played in the 90s total? Like 800-ish? They would have went 800-0. Like,
that would have been, that would have been way too big of a butterfly effect. Like, you don't end up, certain things don't happen.
We had a salary cap like 5 years earlier.
Okay, we're going to wrap up this episode of the Winged Wheel Podcast. Folks, we are officially in our off season, which means we are down to one episode a week. So we're going to still be recording on Sundays. There's going to be bonus content for patrons midweek. So again, Sunday episodes, and then sometime midweek, there is going to be bonus content for patrons. This first week, we may take that a little bit of a break to reset, and we'll start that process next week. Of course, if there is anything emergent, if Steve Yzerman comes in and, signs Tarasenko or trades for Nylander or does something crazy, yeah, we'll record an emergency episode if need be. But for now, we are down to one episode a week for the offseason. So we're not going away. We're just slowing down a little bit to breathe. Evan's watching my handicap slowly fall on the golf course, and now I need to really work on that if I want to break 100 this offseason. You think it's possible?
I do.
And if Evan has that belief in me, you know it's honest, because
that means you're doing it. There's no excuses.
No, that man is ruthless on the golf course. So without further ado, thank you all so much for tuning into this episode. Again, if you want to sit with us at the roast and toast of Thomas Holmstrom and Nicholas Lidstrom, send us a DM on Twitter at Winged Wheel Pod. We'd like to thank all of our listeners, new and old. If you want to support in a way that's not on Patreon, but still help us out, leave a rating wherever you get your podcast and subscribe. So on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, wherever you leave that rating and hit subscribe, it makes a big difference for us. To all of our patrons, thank you very, very much. And to our name level supporters, we couldn't do it without you. Arjun Shankar, Yves Bartels on behalf of the Sarah Grand Foundation, Aikfer, Samuel Soderholm, Raymond's Missing Tooth, Brad's Lord and Savior, Bradley Cleveland, Glenn Brabham, Barnsey, A Broken Man on a Halifax Pier, Keenan O'Donohue, Yanni Burgers, Meals on Wheels, Matthew M. Rice, Croner's Left Knee, Admiral Matt S. at the Cheesebag Navy, Babe Landeskog, Carl Bertin and Analuski, Carzone 13, Citizen High Five, Clip Clop Nay Nay, Connor Scovey, Cookin' with Kosa, Coyote Season Tickets in Anywhere But Tempe, Craig Kibble, Denny's Gamer Girl, Derek Enstam, DJ Denton, Give Blood Fight Probert, Hockeytown Love, Hockeytown Matt, Hissam Al-Qassem, Jay Gollum, Jacob Turner, Joel Miranda, Kalen Wood, King Tone, Larkin the Cat, and Raymond Walk Into a Bar, Marcus, Matt McKay, Michael Edlund, Mitch Collins, Prashanth, the Goalie Truther, YZERMAN, R.A., Red 3, Ryan Hubbard, Scott Martin, That's What I Appreciates About You, the Mexanadian, Walman's Elite Dancing D, When Does the Season Start Again, Iser Plan, Stan, new name level sponsor, Welcome to the Dub Club, General Andy Bohan of the Cheesebag Army, Sam Bankson, A.A. Ron, Adam Rose, Big Cheese, Brad Simmons, Brian Vasha, Captain Antonio Gracias of the United Federation of Cheesebags, Chuck Buff Chest, the Tarpless Goon, Commander Ben Barron of the Cheesebag Space Force, Connor Leighton, Corey Prida, Kringleberg, brand new name level supporter, welcome to the Dub Club, Darren Fick, don't send me another tweet about it until it's done or not done, Elite Defenseman Jonathan Erickson Fan Club, Frank Stanley, Gene Sullivan, Griffey Boy, Henrik Robert Deeks, I'm from Waterloo where the vampires hang out, Instructions Unclear, Cheesebag No Longer Fresh, James Laporte, James Pridemore, Jeremiah Dobo, JM Rhapsody, John Evans, John Engels, Josh Yelton, Kevin McCracken, Quaz, Linda Hull, Maximilian, Melissa Erickson, Norris Seider, Ophelia, Pavel Duck Soup, Shahid Syed, Steven, Tatar Sauce, The Hodag, The Hat 123, Troubadour, brand new name level supporter. Welcome to the Dub Dub Club and your second favorite patron. Thank you all so very much. I have some greens to misread.
Thanks for tuning in to the Winged Wheel Podcast. Be sure to check out wingedwheelpodcast.com, where you can subscribe to the show on iTunes, Spotify, or wherever you get your podcasts. You'll also find links to other ways to support the show, such as Patreon, official podcast apparel, and more. And don't forget to follow the show on Twitter at Winged Wheel Pod. And of course, the hosts at Brad Crisco, at Ryan Hanna WWP, and at Hockeytown Evan.